Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us here on another episode of a Faithfully Radical podcast, and now these wonderful videos we'll be putting out for you. Today we have another really great episode, another sit down with my good friend Matthew Pieters. If you want, could you introduce yourself again, just in case anyone didn't listen to the last one?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Matthew Pieters. I'm the pastor at Bridgepoint Church in Valparaiso, Indiana, and it's really a pleasure to be with you guys today on this podcast.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here, man. We spoke a few weeks ago and put out a podcast episode and a video over church unity and community. And kind of what we want to sit down and do now is flesh out that idea a little bit more. And so today we decided to talk about sacrificial living.
Yep.
Very important to the Christian life. Very important for Christian leaders and pastors such as yourself. And I want to look at how this applies to what we were talking about before, church unity in community. So let's dive right in. One of the first things I have here, we've been called to die to ourselves, to deny ourselves. So can't this mean that it's appropriate to work outside of our comfort zones to attack these cultural problems, to really tackle them and take care of them as pastors and faith leaders in our world? As we think about sacrificial living, doesn't that directly apply? Shouldn't our minds go to giving up certain things to make sure our communities are cared for?
Yeah, absolutely. Jesus told his followers to take up their cross daily and follow him, and that they were going to be dying to who they used to be and living now a whole new life in following Jesus. And that means that your life is not your own. In fact, Scripture talks about in so many ways that we were bought with a price, and that the sacrifice that example was given to us by Jesus. And I mean, I don't know how quickly you want to get into the fray of these things, but that's not what we're taught anymore.
Yeah.
And so we kind of, as Christians, I wonder if many Christians live with kind of a cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Because they kind of see Jesus as this guy who's clearly leading a sacrificial life. Yeah. He stepped out of heaven and he takes on flesh, arguably an inferior position, right, and inferior functionality. Is submissive to the Father, follows the leading of the Spirit, right? Lives this life where he serves and cares for other people, going around preaching and healing and caring for people, and then ultimately he lays his life down, right? Mm-hmm. And so we kind of know.
Right. We know these stories.
Yeah, we kind of know that we're supposed to live this sacrificial life if we are, quote unquote, following Jesus. Like, following Jesus means you're going to behave like Jesus. Yeah. Right? You're going to be like, the servant will be like their master, right? So we kind of know this, but that's not the Christianity that is being promoted today.
That's not the mainstream culture Christianity.
Right. And so there's this dissonance. People are like, wait, am I supposed to be serving or am I supposed to be self-promoting?
Right.
Is this Jesus following about me and my agenda and my lifestyle and perhaps what I'm interested in? Or is he actually asking me to let go of something, to, dare I say it, like hurt a little bit?
Right.
You know?
Things will be uncomfortable.
Yeah, uncomfortable. That might be a more palatable way of putting it.
Hurt and pain is still definitely a part of it.
I wonder if the cross was uncomfortable. I mean, sorry.
That was, yeah. I'm sure more than a little bit. More than a little bit.
Right. So it's been, I think as ministry leaders, it's very important for us to begin to say, okay, are we leading people to really follow Jesus, or are we selling something?
Right.
Are we a part of the problem, or are we going to make a difference because we're actually going to follow Jesus? We're going to have his Spirit living in us, and that will lead us to give up certain things, that will let go of certain things, that will say, it's not about me, it's about him and about his love. And that's going to lead us to a different kind of lifestyle.
Yeah. And I think what we're seeing in culture is pretty much just like what you said. We're almost promoting. We have what I affectionately call churches like butts and seats churches. They're not. We're not really. We've kind of fallen away from actually discipling people to live like Christ, and we're more worried about whether our church is full or, whether our budgets are full,
Sure.
which are important things. I'm not trying to say that these are less than, but
Right.
in a way, we've shifted our focus to. I was just talking to someone about that at lunch today, about how so many churches in our Western culture have became more seeker sensitive, but then kind of stayed there. And we've kind of let congregations be spiritual infants in a way, rather than maturing them.
Right. And of course, I mean, this whole podcast is kind of in a series of church unity.
Right.
And it's very difficult to call people to church unity where churches are obsessed with their own numbers and their own progress rather than connecting sacrificially in order to change the culture, to change the climate, to make a healing contribution in their community.
Yeah.
And, I have to say as a pastor, we talked about some of the obstacles the last time, and those things are still operative here. And yet we're going to really have to say, okay, are we following the Jesus of our imagination?
Right.
Or are we following the incarnate Son of God who died for us and called us to take up our crosses and love people just like he did, which was profoundly sacrificial.
Yeah.
And of course that, I mean, I was just reading the other day, and I regret I can't remember exactly where it was, but it had to be in the Gospel of Mark because I'm in the middle of Mark,
okay,
and so I'd have to go look it up. Okay, it was several days ago, and Jesus makes this very clear point. He says, "No one who has left father or mother, all this, will fail to receive a reward in the kingdom of heaven." So we're not talking about meaningless sacrifice just for the sake of pain.
Right. Just to sacrifice.
No, we're talking about making a strategic decision spiritually, psychologically, socially
Pardon me.
to follow Jesus, and that is going to bear fruit.
Yeah.
That is going to bring a reward. Right?
Yep.
I had someone talk to me, I think this is still on topic, but I had someone call me and said, "Hey man, what's with all the cotton candy Christianity today?" And I was like, "Oh man, do I really want to have this conversation?
Should I address this?"
And he was like, "What is the deal?" And I'm like, "You have to understand that there's a certain benefit that people get by just focusing on sort of the more warm, fuzzy, immediately applicable, this scratches my itch, meets my needs aspects of following Jesus." And it's very hard once you've built your church on that, as butts and seats type churches tend to do. And there's nothing wrong with being seeker sensitive. There's nothing wrong with having an awesome children's ministry.
No,
for example,
not,
that's, hey, I'll be the first person to say thank you, Jesus, for the awesome children's ministry that helped shape my life.
Yeah.
Right. So we're not degrading these things, but if that's all you're doing, and you're not teaching people to engage with Jesus living in them and them making a sacrifice so that they could, through the Spirit of God, make a healing contribution in service or in their community in some way, we're really truncating Christianity at best.
Yeah.
Right?
We're kind of taking a path and then hitting a wall, but it's almost like a non-existent wall. The path keeps going. You need to keep moving. Mm-hmm. You don't just stop at seeker sensitive or anything like that. You keep trucking along.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and, you hit a point earlier, if you, when you were talking about your verse from Mark, and it did remind me of what I had down from Galatians 6:9. "And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." And it's same vein, right? Keep working, keep trucking along and doing the things you were commanded to do, and you'll see those fruits in your life. Oh, pardon me. I got a dry throat today.
Yeah, well, we need to get you some water.
Yeah.
Well, we're podcasting this thing, so we have to keep plowing.
Yep. You're right. Can't take a break for you guys. No. So I did want to recap for any new listeners your story, or the story you told last time of sacrifice from the plagues, of what Christians did at that time.
Oh yeah, that's.
Just jump into that real quick.
Okay, so to catch up the listeners, you can see behind me here are some of the books that are in my library, and I've been fortunate enough that I've had the opportunity to read a lot of books and have a lot of excellent people who have shaped me theologically.
Yeah.
And I would say in my top 5 is a book by a Christian sociologist. His name is Rodney Stark, and he wrote a book called The Rise of Christianity, how a marginal Jesus movement changed the West.
Right.
It's longer than that, but the title. And he just catalogs the various ways that Christians, because of what happened to them in Jesus, sociologically impacted their culture.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Christians did in the early Roman Empire is they cared for the sick and the dying when plagues came. And we don't really have anything comparable to that, especially in the West. No, we don't have that. But what the impact of that was truly amazing, because the Christians would go in and they would give food and water and basic care to people that the whole village had abandoned, or the whole city had abandoned.
Yeah.
And the people that had means would literally go to their mountain homes and get away.
Yeah.
And then here you had these sick and dying people that were supposed to die. But what we find out is that if you give people food, water, and shelter, they have like a 1/3 greater statistical chance of survival. So you just immediately save a third of your people just by showing up and giving them a glass of water. And it's very curious that Jesus talks like this. Okay?
Yeah.
So here they do this, and then these people survive. And they start asking really tough questions. They start saying, well, beautiful questions, actually. They say, so let me get this straight. You risked your own life. And some of you actually did get the disease that I got.
Right.
I lived, you died. You meaning you all Christians.
Yeah.
Right? What in the world? What is going on? And the Christians would basically say, well, you have to understand that we follow Jesus. He died for us. Why wouldn't I be willing to die for you?
Yeah.
I don't know that we have that at all.
I agree
in
with
our
you.
spiritual depth. And then they said, well, what benefit did you get from it? They said the sheer benefit of loving you. What? And then you understand how they can flip a culture.
Yeah.
From being totally self-centered, prideful and arrogant. Roman culture was it was virtuous to be an arrogant, you know what.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That was actually kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think it's kind of cool anymore, because actually we've been more influenced by Christendom than by paganism.
Right.
That might be changing, but
yeah.
The point that's made is that we watched Christians actually make a total difference in their society precisely because they lived selfless lives, which was the one that they were following was Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I don't do that, okay?
Right.
We collectively don't do that.
Right.
But if we're actually going to follow Jesus, and if we actually want to make a difference, right?
Yeah.
Working together and being sacrificial are going to be integral.
Oh, absolutely.
To the success of our faith, so to speak.
Yeah.
The growth of our faith.
And being united together for common goals like that, you know, rather than looking what's going on in your own church, seeing there's people dying out there. Let's all go. You know what I mean? Like they did to the plague victims. You know, let's go care for. And
we're asking questions of, okay, if the plague was what the sacrificial moment needed for them to care for that, what is the comparable thing that's happening today?
Right.
What is it? Is it the opiate crisis?
Yeah.
Is it homelessness? What is it? Is it single families?
Right. What are these issues?
And we may not have something that's exactly comparable, but we will always want to be asking, Lord, you wherever you went, you made sacrifices, and those sacrifices healed and saved people. Jesus, fill us with your Spirit so that when we follow you, we're not living for ourselves.
Right.
We're living for you, and we're going to be bringing your healing presence in everything that we do, and that will include the sacrifices we make. Lord, show us what we're supposed to be sacrificing today.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. And I think there needs to be an acceptance that can be almost anything. God may call you to sacrifice, so as he did some of those people up until their life. Right. You know, it has to be that and anything beneath.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's one particular thing. Like, I don't think we're searching for one thing. That plague example is just a way for us to see something very clear
Right.
in an easily understandable story and go, that's right. That's what Christian sacrifice looks like.
Yeah.
They did it. We should do it. We all follow Jesus together.
Well, and what do you think is causing us to miss such a radical piece to this sacrificial living in our culture today? Any one thing? Is it just our Western culture? Like, what are we missing that we're not as radical or as open to just being like, there's a need out there, I'm going to go meet it regardless of what it costs me? Because you don't see that happening a lot anymore.
Yeah.
Not that people don't do it. I'm not trying to demean those that do.
Well, I mean, what I tend to think about is the deep structures of our culture that we don't really think about.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use an illustration, okay?
Sure.
And it might take me a little while to get there, but I'm going to try to be quick.
Okay, yeah, no worries.
So
it's a 30-minute podcast.
I'm reading Jeremiah, and Jeremiah is going after everybody. He's going after the false prophets. He's going after everybody, okay? And he gets to this one point, and he says something like to the ladies, he's like, I know that you're praying to the fertility goddesses.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, Jeremiah, don't you think our husbands our husbands know that? We know what we're doing. And Jeremiah says something crazy to them like, God is going to take you and your husbands out for worshiping these fertility goddesses. Now, pause tape, okay? Yeah. So I'm like, what are they doing? Why would you, as a self-respecting Israelite woman, knowing that you want to have children, pray to a fertility goddess instead of Yahweh?
Yeah.
Why would you do that? Okay? This is commonly known in theological circles as syncretism. It's where you merge your pure faith, so to speak, with a cultural adaptation or some other spiritual practice.
Sure.
Right? Why would you do that? Okay? It is very easy for you and I to look at that moment in Jeremiah and just be totally perplexed.
Yeah.
Why? Because we don't have fertility goddess issues in our culture.
Yeah.
The women of our day are not particularly concerned about fertility the way the women of that day were millennia ago. Mm-hmm. Okay? But here's the one commonality. Every single person has a syncretistic pressure on them. And if you're in it, you don't see it. So if you were to talk to the women, immediately respond by appealing to authority. In their day, they had their husbands, right? We may feel differently about that today. That's not the point.
No.
The point is, what the message is to Jeremiah is, hey, dude, we're good.
Yeah.
This is normal. This is natural. We're all on board with this, okay? This is fine.
Yeah.
Right? And the reason why they could say that is because the cultural pressures of polytheism and fertility issues were so common that they thought that way.
Yeah.
That was the shape of their society. They just did that. Okay, what's true for us today? This is really hard for us to see, but our culture is a consumer-driven culture.
Yeah.
It's
100%.
It's not agrarian.
Yeah.
Right? It's not even industrial.
No.
Anymore.
No.
It's
consumer.
Goods and services.
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. The United States leads this. We're the world consumer. Okay? Mm-hmm. We are so good at this that it's like in our DNA. Like, I don't need to think about making my eyes blue or yours are like nice brown, right? Like, they just are.
Yeah, that's how they are.
So when we go to do church, we're consumers.
Yeah.
And when we think
it's
about
the mentality.
When we think about growing spiritually, we don't think about sacrifice as the first move.
Right.
We think about, what do I need to consume?
Right. What can I take?
What do I need to take?
Yep.
Now, that's not all bad.
No.
Like, there's something very helpful, brilliant, what's the word I'm looking for? Innovative.
Sure.
About saying, okay, if you have a consumer culture, how can we bring consumer language and structure to be imbued with the gospel, so the gospel of Christ would then challenge, fill up, redeem a consumer culture.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the best end.
Yeah.
Okay? Of the quote unquote seeker sense of butts and seats
Sure.
mentality. Yeah. And you know what? I applaud that.
Yeah.
Because when Jesus came, when Paul went, when all missionaries go, they always say, what's the culture? How can I speak the language?
Speak to the culture.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't speak to something else that's foreign. You speak to the issues of the day.
Yeah.
Right? So let's just acknowledge that we may have a consumer culture. And the question is, where's Christ going to, okay, this is Niebuhr, okay? Yeah. If you know the theologian, he's going to say, is it Christ against culture? Is it Christ filling up culture? Is it Christ over culture? Is it Christ transforming culture? Right?
Okay, yeah.
So if you have, I'm going to use something that's grotesque, just to be real simple.
Okay.
If you have a culture that's entirely imbued with sex trafficking.
Yeah.
We could, by the way, we should have an episode on that.
Okay.
That's or several. Okay.
Yeah.
If you have a culture that has just bowed and accepted this the way the ancient world did,
yeah,
and they would have fertility, sex trafficking, temple prostitutes. You know, I was just reading the other day that in some Babylonian cultures, a young woman was expected to have her first sexual experience in the temple.
Wow.
And then she could go live her normal sexual life.
Wow.
Like, how damaging, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like not okay. Not for, at least I hope I'm not too rash on that one, right? Not okay.
Not okay.
And the New Testament talks about this. Like, you cannot join your body to a prostitute. Yeah. Your spirituality cannot be involved in that. Your sexuality is an amazing gift by God. Here's the deal. Mm-hmm. Do it like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is amazing that the New Testament is so candid about these things. But there are certain things that are not redeemable.
Yeah.
In that way. You cannot syncretize sex trafficking and Christ.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely not. No.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, what elements of our consumer culture are like the prostitution?
Are irredeemable.
They're irredeemable. They are just greedy, greedy, greedy.
Yeah.
They are just self-focused.
Yeah.
They are I, me, my.
Yeah.
Right? Or are they, wow, I could actually give someone what they really need. And they would want this. And they think like a consumer. And they say, well, I'm really hungry. Where do I go to eat? Well, I go to Stratton Van Til. Wherever you go, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You want some coffee, where do you go?
Yeah.
You go wherever in town.
Yeah.
You pick it, you know?
Fluid.
Oh, wow. He's going there. Say hi to Allison when you're over there.
Yeah.
So we have to ask these questions. And I think that, you know, for the scope of this program, it's probably too big. But I think what we want to do is highlight the fact that Christians are often not unified because we live in unwittingly syncretistic.
Yeah.
Our culture is all about itself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there have been even times where they've been published on like cover of like financial magazines, like green is good.
Right.
Green is good.
Yeah.
It's not good.
That's what they consider. I mean, that's what our culture considers, you know, now.
So that's the long answer.
No.
You know, but I think we have to be aware of it. Like, I have to get up every day and I have to say, Lord, where am I in the time and place that you've put me? All right, so you put me in the biggest consumer culture that has ever existed on the planet. God, help me to live and love well within that culture and not let it hijack me.
Yeah.
And shape me in ways that is syncretistic, in ways that you cannot and will not redeem. Right?
Yeah.
And it's way harder.
Oh, absolutely.
Then, you know, it's easy for us to look and say, well, you can't have a fertility goddess. Oh, come on. How in the world could you possibly think sex trafficking and Christ could go together?
Yeah.
Well, in 1,000 years, people are going to look at us and they're going to go, how those selfish Christians in America, how could they possibly behave like that?
Absolutely.
Well, it's like you and I, like I have my contacts in.
Yeah.
I got to take those contacts out for me to be able to see them. A lot of this stuff is just so close. We can't see it unless we slow down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
No, and I had another thing spinning off that consumer culture. I wanted to ask the question, so like, how should we view sacrifice as a manner of living in regards to today's cultural standards, i.e. entertainment, hobbies, Netflix, consumerism?
Wow.
So if we're looking at this culture that is a consumer-driven culture and we're sitting here talking about sacrificial living, that feels like the antithesis of a consumer culture.
Yeah.
What do you think would be the appropriate way to then view how our culture lives, you know, the Netflix culture, the social media culture, the me consumer culture.
Right. Well, I mean,
It's a
I
tough
think
one.
I believe it or not, I have so many thoughts that it's sort of like a log jam in my head. Immediately, what my mind went to is that technology is not neutral.
Yeah.
The myth is that something is neutral. Like your iPhone or your Netflix account isn't neutral.
Yeah.
And we don't really realize the way some of these things have impacted us.
Yeah.
Okay. And that would take us down a rabbit trail that's
right.
too big for our discussion now.
Yeah.
So restate the question again, and maybe we'll be able to answer it. You know, maybe give me some things that you think prime the pump, so to speak.
Prime the pump.
I mean,
okay. No, I understand. Yeah. I like giving you loaded questions. You know what
I will answer the question.
I like shooting them at you.
My immediate answer is probably not something that we want to delve into right
now.
No,
and maybe that's a good point to kind of settle in for that question, is that these things they're not neutral, and they can become rabbit holes. And I think one of the first things that people need to realize when using these seemingly harmless technology, media, or whatever is it is going to have an influence on you one way or the other. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe that's just a good place to start.
Well, I think we're aiding and abetting people's selfishness and not challenging them.
Yeah.
Now, I happen to be, you know, a guy that is naturally inclined to being a high challenge person. So give me any situation and I'm going to make a challenge out of it, which, you know, my wife is, thank God she's a peacemaker, right? It's like we're yin and yang, black and white. So we either, you know, we balance each other out. But, you know, we tend to aid and abet people's self-focus through modern technology and things like that. So I'll give you an example. You can use a video camera like this and you can project your message. Mm-hmm. Okay. You could do it through podcasts, which is awesome. You can do it through live streaming of a worship service. And I know people, right, that will be out of town and then they can watch the video later and they're blessed by that. Yeah. Technology's great. Like, how many different this is a resource. We want to do this for people, right? So that more people could hear this than could jam into this recording space. Okay. But what ends up happening is, you know, I've had people say to me, yeah, so I was like way out late on Saturday night with my friends, and so me and the wife just got up on Sunday morning and we got our little cups of coffee and our little blankies, and we just live streamed the church service.
Yeah.
What? Like,
you lose the point of church at that stage.
And do you know what? I was so conflicted.
Yeah.
Because I was like, you know, no, that was so not good. Like, I'm like, So, and that's sort of just an example of how we have all of these technologies and all of these things that we're doing to help consumers consume the spiritual teachings or influence of the ministries, and it can truly backfire. Yeah. And so we have to be very careful that we encourage people.
We're trying to engage them, but we end up enabling them, essentially.
Yes, and we move past engagement into an enablement. Yeah. And that's why we have to slow down and we have to say, okay, Jesus, what are you really teaching? Yeah. Are we really living sacrificial? Are we really following you? And these questions are they're not easy questions. No. But actually in the long run it'll be way better. You know, I can't tell you, this may be a little rabbit trail, but I can't tell you how many people I have worked with that are addicted to various substances. Sure. And most of the time, people who are addicted, especially very heavy addiction. I'm not talking about like you need a cigarette or you want a cup of coffee. Okay? Yeah. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay. Like, you can't live without the drink. You need that Oxycontin. Yeah. You gotta have that crack. Hard addiction. Yeah, like stuff that is life altering. Yeah. Okay. Don't come talk to me at 6 a.m. when I get up before I've had my cup of coffee. I'm not talking about that level of addiction, okay? Yeah. I'm talking about addictions that shape people's lives, and without them, they fall apart. What ends up happening, what you find, is that people like that are their hearts are broken so much that they do not know how to give and receive love. And I'm very serious about this. I'm not judging or accusing. But what you find is that people cannot serve others.
Yeah.
And real breakthroughs start happening for addicts when they go through a process of saying, God, I've been living my whole life to feed this addiction, to numb my pain, to just survive, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
To stave off the withdrawal,
Yeah.
right? And then they cross over to sacrificially caring for somebody else. And if you know about any kind of recovery programs, so often an integral part of that is someone mentoring another person.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what are they teaching them to do? They're teaching them to live sacrificially.
Yeah.
They're teaching them how to give and receive love. Primarily giving love in the form of non-self-centered sacrificial care.
Right.
And here's the thing. They love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so good for them.
Yep.
And they're like, wow, I just gave my life away today. That was the best thing I've done in years. Shoot, man. That beats heroin every day of the weekend, twice on Sunday. I don't go to church twice anymore, but maybe we should.
Maybe we should.
It's like, and so we have to remember that when we're talking about sacrificial living in Jesus, we're not talking about doom and gloom.
Right.
We're talking about real breakthrough healing.
Yeah.
We're talking about real advances. And you see this all over the place. And I think, just my experience working through my own addiction issues and working with other people who have addiction issues, that this sacrificial element is a major breakthrough.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, what is everyone else addicted to?
Consuming.
Netflix.
Media. Yeah.
I'm not kidding.
No, I'm right there with you.
People are like, social media, like they can't live without it.
Right.
And
it gets so tough because then you find these people.
This is not anti-technology.
No.
We're just trying to speak candidly about issues.
Absolutely. And then what you end up finding, especially when you have Christians, is that we're I want to say starting to, but I feel like that ship has kind of sailed. We're having Christians nowadays who may not know much about the word, know much about who they follow, but last night they binged the last 2 seasons of something. You know what I mean? But
Game
they
of
can't.
Thrones or whatever,
But they can't memorize their Bible verses. Even we have this very real addiction to media, and it's hurting as Christians. I really truly believe that. I think we're growing a population of Christians that are essentially, for lack of a better term, and I don't mean this in any bad way, but biblically and theologically illiterate because they're so focused on media and entertainment. Or sports is another big one.
Yeah, and like there's this incipient anemia that sets in because they're not giving their life away. Mm-hmm. And then when someone asks them to give their life away, what? Like that's no.
Right.
No, I'm supposed to get more because that makes me feel better.
Yep.
Right? And feeling better, after all, is what Jesus came for, right?
But in what
that's found in it's not.
But even so, outside of that, it's like you touched on earlier, when we're giving our lives away and actually sacrificially doing these things, that's true joy. The reason these things such as media and technology become addictions is because the joy ends after a little bit. And then you need more. It's a never-ending cycle that they loop themselves into once you've distanced yourself from the eternal joy and love of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I don't know about how some people feel about church, but I feel like a lot of people simply go to church and they sit in church, and it is the functional equivalent of a Christian entertainment media outlet.
Well, you can see that in how many churches run today. The money's not really always spent on outreach and sacrificial living like we see here. It's on LEDs and 10-foot screens.
Right, and the curious thing is that we want to just be relevant to making sense to people, and I don't begrudge that. Right?
Yep.
But it's like, okay, what really is going to matter is when one person cares for another person.
Yeah.
And that to me is going to have an element of sacrifice to it.
Yeah.
And that's really going to change people's hearts. It's going to change our community. And Jesus is calling us to this.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to slow down. We're going to have to look at it together.
Absolutely.
So.
And it's all about working together and living sacrificially, dying to ourselves as we were called to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've pretty much run out of time.
Have we?
Yeah, we're at about 35.
Oh my goodness! Well, it's been a robust talk.
It has. We have so much we didn't even cover. We'll have to save for next time.
Well, we'll be back. We'll be back soon.
Yeah. To end, I just want to read one more of these verses. Galatians 2:20, I think, is a good one to kind of end on, and for thought and encouragement. And Galatians 2:20 says, "I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me."
Amen.
I think it's just such a good little point at the end of this discussion.
It's the best way to close.
Yeah. And I hope you guys remember that. We're talking to flesh these things out and encourage and tackle these problems that we deal with as Christians in today's Western culture, and living sacrificially is 100% a staple of Christian living. It's what we're called to do. So yeah, thanks for sitting down with us, Matthew. This has been great.
It's good to be here.
It's fantastic. And thank you all for sitting down with us as well. We hope you enjoyed the talk. We hope you enjoyed the video if you're watching on YouTube. And thank you guys. We love you. Pray for us, and we'll pray for you. Thanks.